Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend already. Another Saturday morning edition where we sit down with our buddy Ed McCray, who is awesome, and he has been walking us through Disney history. This is part 4 as we attempt to save Disney history. And Ed and I were talking recently, and we think it'll be about a 12 part. Now, he's going to have more knowledge well after we do 12 episodes of this. But I think we found a good place there where this is going to end up being about 12 episodes worth. So this is basically a college semester with Professor Ed. So this is good stuff, man. If you've missed the first 3 episodes, let's see if I can do this by memory. In fact, I'm going to bring Ed in here right now. Ed, I'm gonna test my memory here, which is not good. So let's see. We talked about Walt. Part 1 was Walt Disney, just how he started down the road into creating the Walt Disney Company and Mickey Mouse and all that good stuff. Right, that was part 1.
And Song of the South.
Song of the South was in that. Yeah. So part 2 is when he was in charge of the company as it really started to take hold as a large part of Americana.
Well, in the faith stuff,
In his faith. Yes, his faith. See, I told you my memory's terrible.
Oh, that's okay.
Because his faith was a much bigger part than people realize in the stuff that he produced. And then part 3 last week, it was life after Walt. It was right. It was, we had Roy Disney taking over, and then where that led through the 90s as things, before we had the term going woke, that the roots of where we are today, those seeds were planted in the Disney Company. Political correctness in the 90s is what has blossomed into the insanity that we're experiencing today. So what is the theme of part 4? We have the subtitle is Disney goes from PC to woke. Is that about right?
That sounds about right.
All right. Well, Professor Ed McCray, take hold. And by the way, I would say that warn everyone that Ed sends me so many pictures, and I do my best to keep up with all the topics and the visual aids as we go along. So I will continue to do my.
We covered 60 years between the last episode and this one, so the other ones aren't going to have this many photos. We had to cover a lot of stuff.
Yeah. No, and I try to pick up words that he says, and I'm like, okay, wait, he's talking.
Well, that's about... what I try to give you
I know
when I bring up a movie, you'll be able to find it in that.
That's
folder.
Right. So I will do my best. You take the floor, sir, and I will I'll throw up the pictures as we see fit. Take it away, Professor Ed McCray, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, we'll start with a little flashback that back in the 80s, it was Eric Larson who trained all of the animators that come in through the college and everything from the 70s and early 80s. He was one of the 9 old men, and he really shepherded everybody at Disney there for the next generation. And when all the executives took over, he was really upset about that. And there was a meeting where he was just pacing back and forth. And he called all the animators in, and he told them, these people are not your friends, and they're going to destroy this place. And he really saw what was going to happen. He passed away, I think, in the 90s. So he didn't live to see all this woke stuff. But there were foreshadowings of what was going to happen. And you had Roy Jr., he was in charge of the animation department, but he only really had any control over the animation department. There's Eric Larson with some of the students that come through Disney there. With the executives taking over, they went from the people that worked with Walt, they would ask, what would Walt do? And the executives just didn't care. And they were just some of the meanest, nastiest people. I've been told that a lot of them had psychological problems. They had a psychiatrist on their floor. But they all wanted to inject their morality into these films. They saw the films as a vehicle to inject morality. Mm-hmm. Now we left off with The Lion King. That one was pretty much left alone because animation wasn't seen as this big important thing as it became, because they didn't make $100 million for an animated film for profit. And then when you got to The Lion King, it got to be $1 billion. That was the most successful animated film ever up to that time, and that it stayed that way till Finding Nemo. And
Wow. So did you? Because I think did we talk about this on the air? Like, what is your what's your take of the Lion King? Are you you got some
it's
opinions
better.
on that,
It's
sir?
better than the films made today, but it's not the best of those four they made in the '90s. I like the Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin more. Most of the
Okay.
people, well, see, on the Lion King they had divided the animation department in half, so you only had half of the top talent on that film. And up till then, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, they were all in the same films.
Uh huh.
And I think Aladdin's a better film story wise and everything. It's a nice animal thing, but I liked the way Glenn Beck broke it down last November on his show. He said that it was all about the times we're in now, and we every the guy gets all the wrong worldview from the frat boys, and they eat the bugs, and he needs Rafiki to wake him up and remind him who he is, and that's what America needs, to be reminded who we are. That I like that version better than the film there. But a lot of people think that Lion King was ripped off of a Japanese anime called Kimba the White Lion. I don't know if that's true, but there's some people that swear that it is.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it was a television show by the people that made Astro Boy. It was from Japan.
Huh.
I remember it I remember it airing in the '80s when I was a kid. They'd air the reruns. But
Okay.
so The Lion King was this huge release, and the Eisner and all them always said that they didn't expect all the animated films to outdo the next one. But after The Lion King, that was a lie. They did, because everyone remembers Pocahontas. They think it was a failure, but it actually made more than all the movies before Aladdin. But
Oh wow.
'94 was the turning point, because that's when Frank Wells died. He was the president at Disney. And it was Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. And Jeffrey Katzenberg wanted to have Frank Wells' job after he died. He died in it was a helicopter crash on Easter Sunday or Easter weekend, if I don't have the day right.
Oh,
And
wow.
remember, I told you Katzenberg was very aggressive about things that he wanted to do. And
Yes.
one thing that's funny is he wanted to do a Mary Poppins sequel, and the woman that created Mary Poppins, she wore him down. The only person that ever wore Jeffrey Katzenberg down was Pamela Travers. And
Oh no.
if you've seen Saving Mr. Banks, that's accurate on how she was. She was a crisp lady like that. And Frank Wells is the
Crisp
one in the
lady.
middle. Jeffrey Katzenberg's on the right, and Michael Eisner on the left. And Eisner wouldn't give Katzenberg the job because he was just so aggressive about it. So Katzenberg leaves, and he goes and co-founds DreamWorks with David Geffen and Steven
Uh-huh.
Spielberg. And
Okay.
they become the competitor for Disney. He starts hiring the talent away and giving them more money. So that makes the price of the wages go up, and all the animated features, the price goes up. And he has to sue Eisner for his bonus, and they settled in 1999 for an undisclosed amount. And
Interesting.
but what Katzenberg also did at Disney was, because Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Picture and it didn't win, he wanted to orchestrate a Best Picture out of an animated film. And they couldn't do it with Lion King because it was too far along. So the next one they could do that with was Pocahontas. And in the original version of Pocahontas, what it was going to be was a more traditional Disney animated film where the animals talked. And there was a turkey character. He's in the folder.
Oh yeah. Okay. I said I was just
John
going.
Candy. This would have been his last role. He
Oh,
was the turkey named Red Feather. And we'll link to an animation test. They dubbed his voice out, but it was done with John Candy. It's the only footage they've ever released with him with that character. And the other character, the dog, was going to be voiced by Stephen Fry. And he's been in the news lately because he's standing with Israel. But he was in the Hobbit movies. He was the mayor in the Peter Jackson Hobbit films.
okay.
Same actor. That's the only thing I know him from. I know he's a comedian from Britain. But he was
why
going to
didn't-
voice the dog.
Okay,
Well, they decided they wanted to be a serious film instead of a traditional animated feature. So the animals became muted. And some people that worked on this animal version, they say it was superior to the version that was made.
How do we get a hold of that, Ed? I want to watch that.
I've said I want to see the. I've seen story reels on other animated films. I've not seen that one. That's one I would like to see.
No
And
kidding.
I would like to
Oh
see John
man.
Candy's final role. He died in '94, and this come out. Pocahontas came out in '95. Now,
Yeah.
the raccoon replaced the John Candy character.
Okay, fine. But
But
man, I want to
I
hear
want,
him as the
yeah,
turkey, man.
yeah. Well, we'll have a link. We'll link to with the sound
Yeah,
alert. They
yeah.
dubbed it so they had to pay his estate, but
What was that you said?
they dubbed a different actor over it when they
Oh,
released the clip for his estate. But you can tell because I've told you it's John Candy. It's his mannerisms. You can tell it's John Candy that's what it was done for. He does the laugh and everything. And but when Pocahontas came out, it didn't do as much as Lion King. I think it did like 250 million, but it still did more than Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. But people don't think of it that way because it didn't do what Lion King did.
right, okay.
And around the same time, Disney also started adapting their animated features to Broadway. And that was they did Beauty and the Beast, they did Lion King, they did another one that they can't. It was going to be an animated feature, but they canceled it. It was called Aida. And I don't know a lot about what the animated film would be, but that one they had Elton John and Tim Rice do the music for it, songs. Tim Rice, they wanted him to do Pocahontas, but he turned it down because he said that it attacked Western culture too much. If you
Wait,
look,
say that again. Who?
Tim Rice, he did the songs for The Lion King with Elton John.
Yeah.
They originally were going to have him. They wanted him for Pocahontas, but he refused to do it because he said that the story attacked Western culture.
Interesting.
And where I heard that story was Mark Stein one day when he was filling in for Rush because he's friends with Tim Rice. And if you look at Pocahontas, it's what the film that they made, how it is, it's the opposite of what really happened because she converts John Smith to paganism. And in real life, Pocahontas converted to Christianity, and it was considered such an important part of American history. That's one of the paintings in the rotunda of the Capitol. Important moments in American history.
Yeah. So go back to the Broadway stuff. You mentioned Beauty and the Beast ended up on Broadway.
Yeah, that was a big hit.
Yeah.
I've never seen any of the Broadway shows, but I know some of the songs.
Yeah, they seem to have quite the longevity there. Like I know Lion King. I mean, it seems like it might be a permanent thing.
That's one of the longest running ones. If it's not the longest, I know it's in the top 5 or something like that.
Yeah. So, do we know how many Disney movies ended up on Broadway?
Well, I know they did those two. Then there was Tarzan. That was one for a while.
Yeah,
they did Mary Poppins. I think there's a Frozen one.
Oh yeah,
they did Little Mermaid. Aladdin's there now.
Is there? Wow.
I know they did. It's never been on Broadway, but they've done Hunchback of Notre Dame to be a Broadway show, but it's never been on Broadway. They did it in Germany, and there's a CD where it's all dubbed in English. They changed the story a little bit, but I do have those because I grew up with the films, and they do alternate versions of the songs, or they add songs in or alternate lyrics. So I always find that interesting because I'm a story guy, so
yeah.
That's why. And other thing that happened in the 90s is, if you remember last time we talked about Roger Rabbit, there was this guy Richard Williams that directed it. He made this film we linked to last week called The Thief and the Cobbler. And what I didn't say about that film, he did that film on his own with his studio. It took him 30 years to make this film, Thief and the Cobbler. And Disney was supposed to finish the film, put the money in to finish the film, and he took too long, and they got someone else to finish the film, and it got taken away from him. And that version we linked to last week, that is the closest it'll ever be seen the way that he made it. You know, when Roy Disney died, he was looking into finishing it the way Richard Williams wanted to do it.
Oh wow! Yeah, I want to encourage everybody that's watching right now that when the episodes are done every week, the discussion between Ed and myself, at some point shortly after, we have all of the links. These are incredible resources that I want to make sure everybody is aware of, embedded in the description of this YouTube video. Just go down to the description and you'll see so much of this stuff that Ed has referenced, and it's just fascinating stuff. You can spend so much time watching these clips and checking out the stuff that he's referencing. It's truly mind-blowing, Ed.
Yeah, there'll be some things here you'll never see on an official release because it's from the animators' pages that actually did those things. And I'll mention when we get to them.
Okay.
But animation was a big thing in the 90s, and when that Thief and the Cobbler finally came out, it got finished up quick, and it was called Arabian Night, and people thought it was a ripoff of Aladdin, by the way. But Vincent Price was in this. They filmed it. They recorded him in the 70s to be in this movie, and he played an evil vizier. Now, if you watch the film, I would say it's probably PG-13. It's not a little kid's film, but it's all done analog. It's before computers, and he animated it like the art of M.C. Escher, where the cube stuff, and it's all spinning. It's just amazing. That's why he got the job to do Roger Rabbit, was because of this film.
Okay.
Because it was a very famous film that it was in development all these years, 30 years working on this film.
Okay.
So now other studios start getting into the animation because Disney is doing so well, and Warner Brothers opens a studio. Fox, originally, they have Don Bluth do some films for them because he was the Disney competitor in the 80s, and he did a version of Thumbelina, and it tested better when they put a Disney logo on the beginning of the film than when it was just the Warner Brothers logo.
Oh, I remember Don Bluth. See, what's happening is when you're giving these presentations, I'm just giving people a background. I'm just rapidly going through pictures trying to find.
You'll be an expert when we're done.
I tell you what. Here we go.
Another
little Don Bluth.
That's Don Bluth. And he ends up going to Fox, and they do the movie Anastasia, and I'll mention a little more about that later. But then there's another one that was a Disney guy that started at the time Don Bluth was there, Richard Rich. And he did a video series of Bible stories and Book of Mormon stories back in the early 90s. They sold them on video cassette. But he also made the film The Swan Princess. And now they've done all these sequels and everything to that after. But if you see the original one, it's more like what Disney used to be at the beginning. I don't have a picture of him. So you don't look.
Look, I love how Ed is reading my mind. Swan Princess.
I don't think I had it. Yeah, I don't think I had that one. But so we'll catch up with John Lasseter. What he did after he got fired from Disney is he joined Pixar, and that was part of Lucasfilm. And the guy that was in charge of Pixar was Ed Catmull. He was more of a computer guy than an artist. And Lasseter starts animating shorts for Pixar. What they do is they sell computers, these Pixar computers for medical research and stuff. And he starts making shorts for them so they can show what they can do potentially with animation. And George Lucas, he got the edit droid out of it and the audio for editing Star Wars and the other films, because he was still going back and doing the sequel, the special editions. He wanted all this stuff to do the special editions. And after he got that, he didn't want to have Pixar anymore, so he looks for a buyer. And Steve Jobs buys Pixar, and he loses like $1 million a year on Pixar just so they can make their first animated film. Now, Disney keeps trying to hire John Lasseter away to come work for them. This is the Eisner Disney now. He was fired under the old regime. And what they end up doing is they make a deal to make Toy Story. And that's how that come about. And Katzenberg was there when they were originally starting on Toy Story, and he almost destroys the film because he wants to make it very edgy. And if you look at the films Katzenberg makes at DreamWorks when they're CGI, they're very edgy. They have the swearing, borderline inappropriate humor, and that's what he was going to do with Toy Story.
Oh no!
And when they tested it, the studio was going to shut it down because it was just so unappealing. And Joe Ranft and Lasseter, and there were a couple other guys. They got together over a weekend and they reworked the film the way they wanted it to be, and then turned around, and that's how we got the Toy Story we have. And,
you talked about the version of Pocahontas with the talking animals and John Candy as the turkey, and how that was, by many opinions, a superior film to the Pocahontas that we ended up with. So that would be, a good piece of history I'd like to go and see. I would also like to see the quote bad piece of history.
There's some of the footage for that has been released on DVDs, and it's very unappealing.
Really?
Yeah,
I
because
would love to see that.
Woody's so nasty and snarky and mean. That's what you have. He's not appealing at all.
Wow.
And he's like a jerk. And they had to turn it around, so you feel like when you see Woody doing those things, you're like, please don't make those choices. And
Interesting.
And they had to turn it around. When we get to Toy Story 2, I'll tell you what happened to Andy's dad.
So
And
I look forward to that.
That even twists it around to Woody.
Is it Tom Hanks as Woody being snarky and
yeah, and they were recording it with Tom Hanks. Now the first choice for Buzz Lightyear was Billy Crystal, and he turned it down. And they got him for Monsters Incorporated as Mike Wazowski.
Mm-hmm.
So all this stuff connects. When Toy Story came out, Woody had a last name. Like there was Buzz Lightyear. Woody's last name, he was Woody Pride. And people don't know that now because you had to be there when the film was released. It was on all the merchandising. He was Woody Pride. And they also had on the merchandising that his gun disappeared. He lost his gun years ago because he's had the holster with no gun. And that no longer worked because in Toy Story 2, he had the hat, and they said he was complete because he had the hat and everything, so he never had a gun. But in the original release, he had lost his gun.
Okay.
And the real reason why there wasn't merchandising like there is now, and there's even that joke in Toy Story 2, they didn't have enough Buzz Lightyear dolls. That was because when Nightmare Before Christmas came out, they had merchandising and no one bought it because it was so off-putting and creepy for where the country was at the time. They rejected that film. And this was a similar kind of deal where Disney was paying another studio to make a film and they distributed it. So they had the same kind of a deal for Pixar. And they weren't expecting it to be what it became. Because when that was going on, that was kind of when the wheels were starting to come off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to get into it, but between this was the time when they opened Euro Disney as well. And that didn't do very well. That's like its whole other thing.
That has recovered, though, has it not?
Yeah, it's recovered now. But
interesting.
It was rejected at the time by Europe. They didn't. They you know how they look down on American stuff, some of the elites.
I will say, though, and I don't want to take you off your path here, but I have a buddy of mine who works for Disney. And I remember when they made the Avatar ride, I guess the whole reason they even built that was because Avatar was much bigger in Europe than it ever was over here. And so
I remember when I've never seen Avatar, but I remember when it came out, they said the college kids were killing themselves because they couldn't live in that planet. And
what?
And what I've read about the plot of Avatar, that's just Dances with Wolves with aliens.
Yeah, I Jeffy and I at the Blaze, coworker of mine, like everybody I think that works under that roof I don't want to speak for everyone, but everything I've heard, everyone that I've talked to doesn't like that movie. Yeah. Jeffy and I were fine with it. I was like, okay, I mean, it is what it is. Yes, I mean, but maybe we're just desensitized to the anti-human.
Well, even Dances with Wolves, that one's anti-Western culture.
Yeah.
And you don't think of it that way, but when it came out, people didn't think of it that way. It's not really historically accurate.
It does make a great ride, though.
Yeah.
Avatar. Okay.
Now, with that I'm going to mention Animal Kingdom a little later anyway.
Okay. Go ahead. Get back to where you were.
Well, I can just say they were going to have a mythology section of that park, and that ended up not happening, and they put Avatar in there instead.
Interesting.
But I'll mention it when I get there.
Yeah. Go back to where you were. Sorry.
What? That's okay. This is when things start going off the rails. And there was the Disney Afternoon that I mentioned last time. Well, now they start making TV series based on the animated features. So they started a Little Mermaid series, an Aladdin series, Lion King series. They eventually do a Hercules series, Tarzan series, and then that gets into they do the direct-to-video sequels, and I call them cheap quills. And that's because they just put them out as a cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was The Return of Jafar, and they edited some episodes together, the pilots for the Aladdin TV series, and they put it out as a sequel. And it did so well, they just started doing all these sequels. And this went on till they eventually bring Lasseter in. And it became a joke. If they were going to do that, what I think they should have done is some of these there were some films that they didn't end up doing over the years at Disney that they could have been like B pictures. They could have had them done overseas and put them out as B pictures with original characters. Like they were going to do Don Quixote, put it out as a direct-to-video thing. It wouldn't have been a big budget film, wouldn't made a lot of money, but maybe as a video sequel, it could have been something. They did that. They did a Three Musketeers with Mickey Mouse that way, and I guess that did all right. And in these films, when they came out, people don't realize this now, and especially the kids that weren't there. These were like huge events when these films came out. And they got bigger and bigger as they went through the 90s. When they released Pocahontas, they did a thing in Central Park in New York City where it was like a drive-in thing, and it was the biggest they said it was the biggest drive-in theater in history, and they had all these screens all over the park, and they did Pocahontas that way. They did when Hunchback came out, they had a Mardi Gras thing in New Orleans, and
Wow.
when Hercules came out, they brought the Main Street Electrical Parade through New York City. And they did a big thing with that. And so these were big events. And now it's the animated films are just so common, people don't think of them that way. And so Katzenberg, he wanted to tailor make a Oscar-winning film. So when he starts up DreamWorks, the first animated film they make is Prince of Egypt. It's a remake of the Ten Commandments. And that's why he wanted to win Best Picture with it. And that's why all the costs go up. And also during this time, Michael Eisner wanted to build a theme park celebrating America. We'll have to talk about that another time, but that got canceled. Disney's America.
Oh, wow. Oh, boy. Yeah, we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. Back to Prince of Egypt. It was I've never seen this. It's an animated version of the Ten Commandments.
Yes, it is.
It came out in 1998. It says there on the poster. Was it
Christmas release?
So was it A, successful, and B, was it true to form?
It was moderately successful, and it was kind of a serious movie, and that's why people didn't like it. But they really tried to market it towards Christian audiences. I remember that from the time they sold things at the Christian bookstores. They had different albums. The same kind of template they used when Disney did Narnia. They did the same kind of thing, even though this was DreamWorks.
So I recall in the 90s, and I don't want to throw you off here, but this is an interesting timing on this Prince of Egypt outreach to Christian churches. I recall somewhere in the mid 90s, there was a boycott by the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant church in the United States. And I don't know. I remember they got kind of lambasted for that boycott, if you will, back in the 90s. And I guess that was based on, it was something to do with.
Well, I'm getting there. That's next.
Okay. Because I'm just curious now. Okay, you'll get there. Is this outreach in 98 a response to trying to bring back evangelicals? Or
I don't think it was. I think it was because when Pocahontas came out, there was a backlash that it wasn't historically accurate, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was the producer on Pocahontas. Because Prince of Egypt starts with a disclaimer at the beginning that they took liberties with the story, and if you want the real story, go look in the Bible.
All right, continue on, Professor.
Well, Disney starts getting flooded with all these executives all through the 90s. Some of them come from Broadway. Some of them come from different companies for studios. Bob Iger comes from ABC when Eisner was he was a former TV executive, so he wanted to buy ABC. And that's how Iger got into the company, Bob Iger. And one of the executives at Disney that come in through this time, his father was one of the plaintiffs in the Supreme Court case that banned school prayer. So think about that. I found that out when I was researching this a couple weeks ago.
And
wow. What's interesting is was around the same time that they shut down the animator prayer meeting by sabotaging it. Now you got to wonder if there's a connection there.
And refresh people's memories if they missed this earlier. How did they sabotage these prayer meetings?
They started bringing in different denominations into the prayer meeting, and then it became different religions. And having Protestants, Christians, Mormons, and then bringing in Buddhists and other things, they're all going to infight. And that's why it kind of imploded because of that.
Wow.
But even when you have Catholics and Protestants, they sometimes they'll fight on some things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring in Mormons, they're going to fight too. So it wasn't about what they agreed on; it's what they disagreed on, and it all imploded. And that was done. The prayer meeting was done by the animators themselves. It was something they set up on their own. It wasn't anything that the management was doing. And there was another executive that came in at this time. He was a flamboyantly gay guy from Broadway, and he was known around the studio as the Dark Fairy.
Okay. What's his name?
Thomas Schumacher.
Okay.
And I don't think I have a picture
of
him.
Picture. Okay, sorry.
But,
I was looking under TND. But anyway, go ahead.
That became public. That was the nickname when the Save Disney stuff started with Roy, and there was a fable about the goose that laid the golden eggs and how the studio kept pushing out the golden eggs, and finally it was laying rotten eggs. And he was the one that was kind of he was under Roy, and now he's in the Broadway department, so he's where he belongs. But we'll get back to him later, because there was a film that he did that Roy shut down, and I'll get to that in a second here, because now we're going to go through all the stuff they were doing through the 90s.
Okay.
Now, I remember I mentioned they brought in the Weinsteins, and they were working with Harvey Weinstein, and yeah. Well, they were making films attacking Judean Christian values. Like they would have a Catholic priest that he would get turned on by seeing people crucified.
Ugh.
And
what year was this?
This was all through the 90s. 92, I think, was the earliest. This is what led to the boycott.
Okay.
And it was film after film where it was the live action department. So Roy didn't have anything to do with this. This was all Katzenberg and Eisner, and then the people that.
And just so people are aware, when you're talking about Roy at this point, you're talking about Roy
Jr.
The son.
Yeah.
So basically the nephew of Walt.
Yes.
Okay.
And they had Oliver Stone making movies that were about historical figures that weren't historically accurate, like he did the Nixon movie. And they had to change things on it because you couldn't call it history anymore. And they did a movie about Jefferson in Paris, and that pushed the Sally Heming thing. That's why that caught on, was because of this movie.
Oh my goodness! I didn't realize Disney was behind that. Can I just say, fun fact? When Nixon gave his "I'm not a crook. Americans need to know their president's not a crook," he gave that at Disney World. Like that was in the Polynesian Hotel, I think it is. Is that right? Fascinating. I just recently learned that, so I had to share it when you mentioned
Nixon was friends with Walt. We'll have to talk about that sometime.
Okay, interesting.
They kidnapped Nixon on the monorail when Nixon came to. He's the one that was there to christen the monorail where they break the champagne over the end, and he went for a ride on it, and the Secret Service didn't get on, and they were chasing the monorail, trying to get on the monorail, and the guy just kept going around. Nixon thought this was hilarious. So then they come around again. Here comes all the Secret Service trying to jump on. They go around again.
Oh my goodness. I'd love to see video footage of that.
I think there is some.
You keep talking. I'm gonna look here because that's hysterical. I gotta
find that. So they kept pushing these Rainbow Jihad films as well with the gay agenda stuff, and it's the activist stuff. And the thing that finally led to the boycott was they hired this pedophile. He was a convicted pedophile director, and he directed the film called Powder. And
I've not seen.
I've not seen it either, but I found out that Sean Patrick Flannery was in it. That was just in Nefarious, and I kind of wonder what he'd have to say about the director. But the director, he was found guilty of 5 felonies in 1988, and because he was grooming these child actors, and that's why he was busted.
Oh gosh!
And one of the things that was said of him by the critics was, he's blessed with a gift for getting inside the minds of children. And this is a pedophile they're talking about. Ugh. And the script for Powder he wrote in jail. And it's supposed to be, I've never seen the film, but it's supposed to be all coated with this kind of stuff throughout it. But then a few years ago, they did Jeepers Creepers 3. And there was you remember this in the news where there was a thing about it having pedophile stuff in it? It's the same guy. It was his film. So this stuff, it just keeps going around in a cycle. It's just the same guy. And then also what happened was they they had the gay days at Disney start up in the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
And Disney claimed that they had nothing to do with it. But if you remember a few years ago when the stuff was going on with Ron DeSantis in Florida, there were Christian events at Disney. It was kind of the same thing that Disney had nothing to do with, and they just let them have them at the park. Well, they shut them down in 2020. They told them they weren't welcome there anymore. So it's like the opposite of the gay days thing. And they had pro-gay policies that people didn't like. And this was all the stuff that led to the boycott. These the gay activists, they started adopting some of the Disney characters, saying they were gay role models, like Peter Pan and Pinocchio. That I don't understand this. The Cheshire Cat is a gay stereotype or something.
Okay.
Then there was the cartoon Lambert, the sheepish lion, and I don't understand this either, because this has also been adopted by the trans people now. That cartoon's about a lion that's raised as a sheep, but at the end of the cartoon, instinct kicks in and he's a lion. So isn't that the opposite of the? We'll link to this cartoon in our links today. I
love it. Okay, I can't wait for that. I got to see that.
And it also came out around this time that a lot of the people in the costumes at Disney that they were part of this jihad thing, they're people that are into the furry stuff, and that's like where they get turned on dressed like animals. And then you had same time Ellen DeGeneres. This was Disney too. Now her sitcom started out called These Friends of Mine, and they changed it into Ellen, and they made it a vehicle to push the gay agenda, because she remember in the 90s when she came out on the show and all.
I remember that big time.
But this was all part of that. Mm-hmm. And then Rosie O'Donnell, remember they sold her as the Queen of Nice. Then when she got on The View in the 2000s, people saw how she actually was. You remember this? She had a talk show in the 90s, like
yes.
And then she would always pretend she had a crush on Tom Cruise. But people didn't know she was gay yet.
Okay. All right.
That
interesting.
Came out later. But then they did the same with Ellen DeGeneres. After she was disgraced, a few years later, they gave her a talk show, and she came out as the quirky lesbian that did the dances and everything.
Right. So when did ABC buy Disney? Do you know the year of that?
Oh, Disney bought ABC. It was.
Disney. That's what I meant to say.
I think it was 96.
Okay.
I'm going off the top of my head. I didn't write the year down for that.
No, that seems right, man.
So I seem to remember it was around the time of the Animal Kingdom.
Boy, you nailed it. 96.
Oh, I lived it, so.
Okay.
And the other, around this time, there was an article where someone complained that with the boycotts, they said 30% of the staff at Disney was gay, and Eisner said, actually, it's closer to 40%. And that kind of fueled it.
Okay.
And if you want to, I'll mention that merchandise now that all through the 90s they would make menorahs, and they would have them in the Disney catalog. And they quit doing menorahs because they said it had the characters on them. Like they had Winnie the Pooh and they had the Mickey Mouse and everything. They quit making them because they said it was political. Well, now they do all this rainbow merchandise. And they started doing it, getting into tarot cards and things too. And it's like odd. One thing, tarot cards, that's occultic stuff. So
sure. So they used to sell
menorahs,
Disney themed menorahs.
Yeah, and they didn't do nativities because when it was the old regime, they thought it would be disrespectful to have a nativity with the Disney characters. The new regime didn't want to do anything pro-Christian. So it's like that's why there are no nativities, but there are menorahs. And my favorite one of the menorahs, it has like Mickey, Donald, Goofy, all of them. They're dancing the horror, and you put the candles on their head.
When did they stop selling the menorahs?
When I was in college is when this switched. Because I remember getting the Disney catalogs all through the 90s, and they would have a new one every year. They'd have a new Pooh menorah and a new Mickey Mouse one.
So when you were in college?
I was there 99 to 2003. I'm only a little bit younger than you.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
And that's still continued with the TV shows normalizing things, because there was Modern Family. That was an ABC show.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't understand about that is that Eric Stone Street guy that plays one of the gay characters, he always went out and he said he was playing that character as his mother. So why is that not the same as someone in blackface or because when he said he's playing the character like he would play his mother.
Uh-huh.
So I would think that would be disrespectful. But they take it and run. Maybe in a few decades that stuff will be banned because they'll say that's like blackface. So all these boycotts start, and the animated films start making less money. And but also that's where a lot of those urban legends came from that we talked about in it was episode 2. That come out of the boycotters, where they would say all this stuff was hidden in the films, but it really wasn't. But then they would also lie about things that were in the films, like they would say that Beauty and the Beast was about bestiality. But that's the fairy tales about don't judge a book by its cover, a person by its cover. And because I was listening to Christian radio and everything at this time, so I heard all the talk shows in the afternoon. They'd have talk shows talking about this stuff, and people would be freaking out about it. And they said that the Little Mermaid, what that was about was the dad is a bad father, and the child's rewarded for disobeying her dad. But if you look at the film, she doesn't get what she wants by disobeying the dad, because she loses her voice, and it's like all this. She ends up naked and it's all sleazy, that kind of thing. When she goes out, disobeys her dad and goes to the witch, and then when she reconciles with the dad, he gives her the legs, and she also gets a dress. Her tail becomes a dress. And I don't see it that way, but that's how they see it. And one other thing to get on that goes with this is back in the 70s when they opened Disney World. We have a picture of this in that main folder. There was the orange bird. He was the mascot for Disney World when it first opened, because it tied in with the orange farmers in Florida.
Yeah, I like this guy.
Oh yeah, well he's come back now, but this is like the opposite of what we just talked about. The singer of the Orange Bird, the narrator, it was a woman called Anita Bryant. And she started an organization claiming that the Rainbow Jihad was coming after your children. They were going to groom your children. And that's what all this, and this was in the 70s. And
wait, hold on. I was looking for the Orange Bird.
Yeah.
Are you saying the Orange Bird is connected to this?
Yeah, because this is what happens to the Orange Bird. See, because Anita Bryant started this organization where she was seen as anti-gay, but she was anti-Rainbow Jihad, because she said they were coming to groom the kids. They were coming for your children.
With the Orange Bird?
Well, no. The Orange Bird was a casualty. She was talking about the culture with the laws and everything. And this is when they were starting to get more laxed. And it was starting to get depicted on television and things. And so she started this organization. She got called a bigot and everything. And what ends up happening is the gay community starts boycotting Florida oranges. And they have shirts and things that say, Anita Bryant can go suck an orange. And she got assaulted on television by a gay activist.
Wow.
And what ends up happening is when Eisner takes over, they retire the Orange Bird because it's seen as an anti-gay symbol because of Anita Bryant was the singer. Yeah.
All right.
How he comes back is in Japan, he became very popular around 1999, and now the Orange Bird's back over here. But every time they bring up the Orange Bird anywhere, you get all these Rainbow Jihad people. They all bring up Anita Bryant. And people wouldn't even know who she was if they didn't keep bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't even around in the 70s, so I wouldn't have known. But it comes up all the time.
I like the Orange Bird. He looks cool.
Yeah. And
his leaves or his wings. I mean, that's awesome.
We're going to link to it. I found an animated cartoon with him. And I'd never seen it before until yesterday.
All right. Don't forget in the description.
It is. And it's an adaptation of the record. And the Sherman Brothers wrote all the songs for the Orange Bird. He doesn't speak. He thinks orange thoughts.
He thinks orange thoughts. Okay.
Yeah. He's just a real clever little character.
Yeah.
So some more of the things that happened, they started doing the live action films, like they did 101 Dalmatians. They did a remake of Flubber. There was The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. And now the other studios, Don Bluth, he does Anastasia with Fox. And it's seen as such a threat to Disney that they released Little Mermaid. This is 1997, but they claim it's a 10th anniversary release. Little Mermaid came out in 1989, so it's really 8 years. And
Anastasia, okay.
They tried to thwart Anastasia because Anastasia was Fox. Now they own Fox, so Anastasia's a Disney princess. But that's what's funny about this. But back they wanted to destroy it, but it becomes the most successful non-Disney animated film of that time. And with Hercules came out the same year, that didn't do as well as Anastasia. It struggled to break 100 million. See, before this, all the films were making over 100 million. When they started boycotting, they were struggling to make 100 million. And I say the boycott had an effect. But the animation gatekeepers, they won't even talk about that there was a boycott. Don't even acknowledge it. But I think it was a factor. How do the films change what they're bringing in that quick overnight? Because they were just going more and more and more, and they don't even recover what they were earlier. And with Hercules, James Woods. We have to mention it because James Woods was Hades in that. You know James Woods, the conservative tweeter, the actor that always on Twitter. But originally they wanted Jack Nicholson. He turned it down. Then they got John Lithgow. And I don't think we have pictures of that, but we're going to have clips of John Lithgow as Hades. And they hired him as Hades, and Michael Eisner didn't like him in the role, so he fired him. So Jeffrey Katzenberg, he hires John Lithgow to be Lord Farquaad in Shrek because Katzenberg fired him for Hercules.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and we're going to get to Shrek in a little bit. But Mulan comes out the following year, and that was the first film that was fully made in Florida. And now that one gets tied into this rainbow jihad thing because they try to make her into a bisexual character, the jihad people, not Disney. But because she dresses up as a man to take her father's place in war. It has nothing to do with sexuality, but she's become a character like that to the activists. And that one did a little better than Hercules, but it wasn't a big success like it's thought of today. But then that fall was A Bug's Life. That was Pixar's second film.
I remember that. Yep.
And I'm glad everybody's finally caught on about the conservative angle of that movie. Because if you look at it, it's probably the most conservative animated film ever because it's about everyone banding together and they link arms against the grasshoppers. There's only a few grasshoppers. They stand up to them. And
it's been on in the background so many times, but I don't think I've seen it though.
It's worth seeing.
We're seeing then. Okay, cool.
And now they don't even talk about it because it's got that conservative reputation.
Are the grasshoppers the government?
You can see him that way. But Kevin Spacey was the head grasshopper, so that's another reason why they've canceled it because now he's in all that trouble.
Okay.
And that one's worth seeing definitely. But I think they don't talk about it now because of Kevin Spacey and because of the conservative edge to it. And that's completely an accident that it was conservative because they don't do this stuff on purpose. They see it as being liberal. So it's like people don't understand what the words mean anymore. Disconnect. And following year, Tarzan comes out, and they put Rosie O'Donnell on that as a gender-neutral character. She's a gorilla, but they don't say if she's a boy or a girl. And in the book, in the book, it's a boy in the book.
Okay. And that was in Tarzan.
That was in Tarzan.
All right.
And
I got a Tarzan. There's a Tarzan picture here somewhere. I know for a fact.
You don't have to get it out. Because now I'll do Toy Story 2, and I'll tell you the story about Andy's dad.
Too bad, Ed, because I found the Tarzan picture.
Bring him up. Bring up Tarzan.
There's Tarzan.
There he is.
All right, cool. I remember from that that Phil Collins did that soundtrack.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because what I was going to say with that is
don't you dare ruin Phil Collins for me, Ed.
No, I'm not going to ruin Phil Collins, but because they did Lion King with Elton John, they started bringing in rock and roll stars to do because they did Phil Collins with Tarzan, they did Brother Bear, and they brought Sting in, who ended up doing The Emperor's New Groove, but that's going to be a story as well.
I mean, this was the gateway that I used to introduce my kids to Phil Collins and Genesis. Was the Tarzan soundtrack.
And I don't know if that soundtrack was successful or not. I don't.
That's
remember.
Too bad. There's some good songs on there.
I know. That movie came out when I graduated high school.
Okay.
So I was thinking that is right. Toy Story 2 was that fall, and it was originally going to be a direct-to-video sequel. Pixar took over, and they only had less than a year to finish this film. And these films usually take 4 years. And what's in common with all these films in the early 90s and the early Pixar films, they were all made in warehouses with people just trying to make an entertaining movie. And a lot of times they only had a year to put the movie together. And Toy Story 2, they've done a mathematical formula on the best films ever made, and the ones that were perfect in the formula were The Godfather 2 and Toy Story 2. And around the time Toy Story 2 came out, there was a guy that was a friend of Joe Ranft who he was the story guy at Pixar. And this guy that met with him, he was the model for Al the toy maker or the toy collector in Toy Story 2. And we're going to link to him talking about this. But he has lunch with Joe Ranft, and this guy, he picks out all these flaws that he thinks are in the Toy Story films. And Joe Ranft says, well, those weren't flaws. He tells him the whole story of Andy's dad. And if you didn't know, Andy's last name is Davis. So his dad was also named Andy. It was Andy Davis Sr.
Oh, wow.
His people say, well, why aren't there any photos of the dad in the house? Well, there are photos of the dad in the house. All the pictures on the stairway, those are his dad when he was a little boy, because they're living in the grandmother's house. And I'll get to why. I'll get to why in a second.
Okay.
First, we have the backstory. That was the house Andy's dad grew up in. And his favorite show was Woody's Roundup. You remember that was in Toy Story 2, Woody's Roundup? It was sponsored by the cereal Cowboy Crunchies. And Joe Ranft had asked this guy years before, what would make a toy valuable that it would for the plot of the movie? And so this guy said, well, if it was a mail-away toy, that would make it more rare. So they came up with that Woody was a mail-away toy, and that was the only way to get Woody in this set of the Woody's Roundup characters. And you had to have 30 box tops. But Andy's family was poor, and he could only get 7 box tops. And there was like a deadline when this contest was done. He sent the box tops in. He wrote a letter and said he was Woody's favorite deputy. Please accept the 7 box tops. He really wants a Woody doll. And he decorates the envelope so it stands out. And so the only Woody that was ever made was a Woody prototype. And what happens while this letter's en route is the thing with Sputnik goes up. And so all the kids want space toys. And this was before Woody goes into production.
Okay.
So the serial executives, they all get together and they said, well, the kids aren't going to want cowboys. They want space toys. We're just not going to do the Woody promotion. And so they canceled plans to fulfill the thing. They're just going to send them space toys. And the secretary, she's like, well, what do you want me to do with this Woody doll that's the prototype? And they just want to throw it away. Well, she decides she's going to pick out a letter that's the most deserving child to get this Woody doll. And that's Andy's dad. And this is why Woody doesn't know who he is, because the Woody's Roundup was canceled. It was never in reruns, and he was a prototype. So he didn't, like Buzz Lightyear, all the merchandise was everywhere.
Yeah, okay.
Woody wasn't around that, so he didn't know. So the Andy that wrote his name on Woody's boot, that's Andy's dad. And so what happens to Andy's dad is he contracts polio. And it's a highly contagious disease.
And where is this story?
Joe Ranft told this story. Joe Ranft was the head of story on the Toy Story films. This was his thing. And this is just amazing.
Yeah.
So polio was highly contagious. And what they did back then, this was before the polio vaccine it was 57, but the vaccine started, I think, in 56, but it didn't go widestream until like 62. Okay. And his family was poor anyway, so they didn't have access. But what Joe Ranft said is they because it was highly contagious, they were going to burn all the toys. And at this point, Andy's dad can't walk. He crawls out to where they're going to burn the toys. He saves Woody, Slinky Dog, Mr. Potato Head. He puts him in a pillowcase, crawls back in the house. He crawls upstairs into the attic, and he promises Woody he'll be back someday. And he tells him just go to sleep. He's got to go to the hospital. He locks him in a box in the attic, and he crawls back downstairs. Well, he goes to the hospital and he gets better, but he's years go by. He outgrows the toys.
Man,
so
this has got to be
this could be the prequel.
I was gonna say this could be I was gonna say maybe a short at the beginning of another Toy Story. I mean, I don't know.
I think this is
but you're right. It's a whole movie in of itself, man.
because well, we're almost to what happens next. When Andy's dad grows up, he moves to Seattle, and that's where he meets his wife. That's going to be Andy's mom.
Okay.
Well, what this guy that told the story he never mentioned is he didn't know why it was in Seattle. Joe Ranft lived in Seattle, and I think that's where he met his wife. So he put that in the story.
How cool.
So Andy's mom's name is Jennifer, by the way. People don't know that.
Okay.
So they get married and they start to have a family. Well, then she's pregnant with the daughter. Then Andy Sr. gets post-polio syndrome. And if you look that up, people would get that, and a lot of times they would die from it. That's people after they've had polio, because it never leaves your body. So they end up losing everything, their house, and they have to go. They move to Andy's house he grew up with, and they live with the grandmother. And that's why all the photos on the wall are this house was the grandmother is alive, but you don't see her in the movie. Is what Joe Ranft said. And things that back this up is the kid in the photo. He wears glasses. And he's missing teeth, and Andy's not missing teeth in the movie. So what ends up happening is Andy Sr., he gives Andy Jr. a key from his wallet, and he tells him upstairs in the attic, there's this key will open a box, and in this box it has the best friend that he had when he was growing up, and he'll be his best friend too. And so Andy goes up and gets the box, Andy Jr., he comes back down, and the dad passes away. He died while he was upstairs. So they have the funeral and everything, and then afterwards, Andy opens the box, and the toys, because Andy looks just like his dad, they think it's the Andy Sr. So that's why they don't realize all this time's passed.
Oh my goodness.
And the grandmother recognizes Woody and tells the story of how her son got the Woody doll. And that's why Woody was his favorite toy, because it was his dad's favorite toy, reminded him of his father. And the other thing that backs this up is at the end of the movie where they have the truck taking all the furniture. You know, it's not a full truck of furniture. If you ever moved, your truck moving van is full of furniture. It's because all their furniture from Seattle was in storage. And this was just the stuff that they had at the grandmother's house. And if you also think about it in Toy Story 3, where he gives Woody away, he kind of contemplates while he's looking at Woody. He's thinking of his dad because of this backstory. And there's also a little bit more to the backstory. The Aleph Mal's toy barn, he grew up with Andy's dad. He bullied him because Andy's dad was a sickly kid. And Andy's dad worked for Al's dad on a farm. And that Al's family was wealthy. And he didn't have a mother, but his dad spoiled him with toys. And he even tried to, Joe Ranft said he even tried to steal Woody from Andy at one point, Andy Sr. So what ends up happening is Al starts selling off the family farm, and that's why all the buildings are around that barn in Toy Story 2. That was the family barn. He turned it into a store for to sell toys. That was the family barn that they all worked at. And Al squanders the money, and that's why he wants to sell the collection to the museum. So all this is in, you see all the seeds in the films, but Joe Ranft had this all planned out.
Who was he telling this to? Where was this conversation being had?
It was at the Hidden City Cafe next door to where the original Pixar was. And in Monsters Incorporated, the Hidden City Cafe is in that movie, in the Easter egg. But then that was the original title for Monsters Incorporated, was the Hidden City. But he told this guy that they'd been friends because this guy was a toy collector, and he'd been like the consultant on all this stuff. And they made Al from Al's Toy Barn. He looks just like this guy. He had the same glasses and everything. And so this guy, he's like all stunned when he said Joe Ranft spent like 2 hours telling him this story.
I bet. This is fascinating, man.
And he said to Joe Ranft, if you thought of all this stuff, why didn't you put more of it in the movie? What was the point of thinking about it? And Joe Ranft said, well, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And then years later, Cars comes out, and Mater says that same line to Lightning McQueen. And that's where that come from, was Joe Ranft would always say that. And this guy that he told this to, he said that he had to leave the theater when he saw that because it just made him think back to his friend that passed away. And now when this story came out, it was all through the news and everything. When this came out, it's probably 10 years ago. Andrew Stanton, that wrote the script for Toy Story film, for Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 1, he put a snarky comment on Twitter. It was fake news and denied it ever happened. But then he took the tweet down, and what this guy says, what he thinks happened is John Lasseter took him aside, and he said, "No, this was the backstory for Andy and the toys and everything."
Wow.
But I know most of you people don't know the Walt stories. I know most of you probably don't know that and would think it's fascinating. So that's why I retold it today.
That's cool. I love that. That is. So how are we going to get this movie made? This prequel?
I don't know. The reason the guy said that he thinks that Joe Ranft said that is because they were making the Lightyear movie and they were making Toy Story 4 when this had come out. Now I'd rather see this than the Lightyear movie. I didn't see the Lightyear movie, but I think this would have been a nice. It's kind of a sad. See, stuff Joe Ranft did. It always had. There was always an edge to it, like a sadness to
sentimental stuff.
Yeah, and he had like a dark sense of humor as well. But this is kind of dark for an animated film because of the death and everything.
Yeah.
But it adds more depth to the other films. That's what I like about it.
It sure does. Boy, I'd love to see this get made, man.
But make sure you tell Glenn about this one, maybe.
Okay. Man, that's cool. Yeah.
So
this story that was told, there's not a video of it then.
There's no video. It's just an oral history. But I believe the guy because he didn't know a lot of details about Joe Ranft, like he grew up in Seattle, and he kept questioning when I looked at he's told this story like 3 or 4 times online, and it's been in articles and stuff. He didn't know Joe Ranft met his wife in Seattle and lived there for a while and things like that. So it's very specific like that. I believe the guy, the testimony in this, and the things like the photos of Andy's dad where he's got the glasses and he's missing teeth because Andy doesn't have those. So I really believe this is the canon. This is Joe Ranft. That's why I told it we have to draw attention to Joe Ranft.
I mean, how many other podcasts right now are available to you where they use the phrase Toy Story canon?
I don't know.
Right here. This is the one. This is the one.
And the other thing that was going on at this time, back to the Disney narrative, Michael Eisner shut down showing vintage Disney films on the Disney Channel. And it was called Walt Disney, and they would show them all night long. And
why would he do that?
He wanted to put demand up to sell those movies on DVD.
Here we go.
And so
cha-ching.
What they did was that the first couple batches, they did 2-disc sets, and they were called the sets Walt Disney. And he eventually quits doing 2-disc sets. And Roy starts doing Disney Treasures around this time, and they start putting out short cartoons and things. And it's like, thank God that he did, because Bob Iger said that they're never going to release this stuff again. And Eisner shuts down the 2-disc releases. He says only soccer moms buy DVDs, and they don't want to see bonus features. But I think all this stuff's fascinating. And all these DVDs came out when I was in college, so I was just soaking all this stuff up. And with the animated films, Roy had a pet project all through the 90s. It was Fantasia 2000. It was going to be a sequel to Fantasia, but it didn't have a narrative like the original one, like I said, where Walt was telling the story about man searching for God. And they were doing these random shorts in between the features all through the 90s. And one of the shorts that came to be was because...
I found Fantasia 2000.
I think there's one there.
Yeah, I just found it. Sorry. I haven't had to do I've been so fascinated. I haven't even been looking for pictures, man.
That's okay.
Fantasia 2000.
There they are. There's a whole thing about how that whole film came to be. But the interesting thing is the film that became The Emperor's New Groove, it started out as a film called Kingdom of the Sun. And it was like a Prince and the Pauper story. And the witch in that, Yzma, I don't think that was her name at the time. She was afraid of aging, and she wanted to block out the sun. And this whole Prince and the Pauper thing, she ends up turning the one into a llama and all this stuff. The original cast, it was still going to be the guy that was Cusco. I can't think of his name from Saturday Night Live.
Oh, no, I don't know.
You know who I mean? The snarky guy. Well, him and Owen Wilson were going to be the stars, where it was like the Prince and the Pauper, where they switched places. They had a little idol character.
Oh, you're talking about David Spade? Is that who you're talking about?
David Spade.
Yeah, he was great in that. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's like that in real life, is what I've been told by people that worked on it. That's him in real life. Owen Wilson was going to switch places with him in that movie.
Interesting.
When it was the Prince and the Pauper, they wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to play like a little idol of a god. It was because they thought it'd be funny. Schwarzenegger turned him down, so they decided, well, we'll go get Harvey Feinstein. You know, he was in Independence Day. He was the guy that ran the cable company he's got that gravelly voice.
Uh-huh.
And he was also in Mulan. He was one of those guys. But they cast Harvey Feinstein because they thought it would stick it to Schwarzenegger. They cast a gay actor. Like that was an issue that Schwarzenegger even cared about, because that's always the stereotype. Well, and now if you look in The Emperor's New Groove on the table when they do the scene where they turn him into the llama, that little idol character is like a candelabra holding 2 candles on that table. That was the character from the original version. Well, this film wasn't working, so Eisner shuts it down, and they shut down for 6 months to retool, and that's when it becomes The Emperor's New Groove. While it was shut down, they had to have something for the animators to do, so they animated Rhapsody in blue, and it was originally going to be a short on its own, and they put it into Fantasia 2000, and then everybody says that's probably the best short in that whole feature. And we're going to link to that too, Rhapsody in blue.
Wow. Okay.
It was directed by Eric Goldberg. He did the Genie in Aladdin. He also was the co-director on Pocahontas, but he was on it when it was going to be with the animals and everything. He stayed with it, but he's a comedy director. Why would you want him to do a serious drama? And what's also interesting about that with Pocahontas is they worked with all the experts and everything on that, so they could get all the stuff right with the left. Now they're all attacking Pocahontas as it's problematic and racist and all this stuff, but they worked with the experts when they made it. So it's like, what's the point of working with the experts? Just tell a good story. So you had those two. Then you have over at DreamWorks, Katzenberg releases Shrek.
Oh, we're getting to Shrek. Okay.
And that was seen as an assault on Disney. He was attacking them for how he felt he was slighted by Disney. And the whole thing he does with DreamWorks, every film they do for the first 10 years or so, it's always a knockoff of a Disney film. Like with A Bug's Life, he put out Ants, and he knew about A Bug's Life when he was there, and he was talking to John Lasseter after he'd left Disney, and they do Ants. With Toy Story, they do Small Soldiers. Emperor's New Groove, they do Road to El Dorado. Finding Nemo, A Shark's Tale. Madagascar, The Wild. The Incredibles, Megamind. So it's like everything Katzenberg does is to knock off Disney. And that's how they started out.
Ants. How was that?
That was awful. That had Woody Allen in it.
Oh.
And they had to rush to get that out before A Bug's Life because they wanted to screw Disney.
So would they find out what they're working on over there? It seems like that would be difficult to rush an animated anything.
Well, they had 4 years because Katzenberg left in they had more than that because Katzenberg left in 94.
So they knew the ideas that he was taking with him.
They knew the general ideas of where Disney was going, so that's why he put his films in that category. Other than Shrek was directly, the whole thing was they even had Your Country Bears in it, but they cut him out.
What?
Yeah. Oh. They passed a Big Al lookalike on a ride.
Hold on a second. Is that going to be in the links below? Is that their video of that?
I can put it in the links, but I didn't think to. But I can.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that.
Now, originally, Shrek was going to be Chris Farley. That's not in my notes, but Chris Farley died, so they didn't.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah.
And Janine Garofalo would have been the princess if that had, in that version.
Because there are now I've seen those, and it was probably from you, honestly.
No, I don't think that one was from me.
Okay, I've seen what do you call them? I don't know, auditions or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Some of the storyboards and animatics and everything, they're all out there with just
it's Chris Farley's voice with Shrek. Yeah, I remember that.
It was a different design for Shrek, but that was what the original concept was. Now, Monsters Inc. comes out, and what they do with Shrek is they put the video out on a Friday to compete with Monsters Incorporated opening that Friday. And videos always come out on Tuesdays. And I remember this because I was in college and this came out. And they thought it would hurt Monsters Incorporated. Now, Monsters Incorporated, we're gonna link to an original version. It was the second version of the story where the girl was a little older. It's gonna be in our links. But the original concept for that was going to be about an adult guy facing his fears, and he makes all of his monsters disappear. And the heart of the story was supposed to be he bonded with one of the monsters, but then he faced his fears, so the monster disappears and he says goodbye. But it was his friend by that point. And the version we have now, that's the third version. That the version that they made with the kids in cages and everything. I think you've talked about that on Pat Gray's Unleashed.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some interesting theories behind that now.
But that came about on its own. I don't think that they had planned it that way. It's just kind of interesting that you can read that into it.
Okay.
But because they were going to have a whole scene where they were planning on kidnapping kids and taking them to the monster world, putting them in cages and just scaring them all the time. But they didn't have enough resources to do the cages. They were going to have a scene where they were chasing Randall through the factory and they passed this room and it's full of cages. And that's when Sully and Mike realize they're going to put kids in cages and they're going to kidnap these kids and bring them here and just scare them all the time.
God, it's so twisted, man.
Yeah, well, that got cut out, but that's what it was. And really, what they did a sequel, where they had them in college. What they should have done was the girl in college, and she's saying goodbye to childhood, and the monsters symbolize that. That's what I would have done, but they went with them into college. I didn't really care for that as a sequel or prequel or whatever.
Yeah, it was okay, but you're right. It was nothing like the original. That's for sure.
And another time we'll have to talk about the sequel that they didn't make. That they brought in the writers from Meet the Parents to do. Disney did when they were going to break up with Pixar, and they had a Toy Story sequel and they had one for Monsters Incorporated, and even that was better than the college prequel that they made. And Disney is starting to get conflict with Pixar, so they set up their own computer animation studio, and it's known as the Secret Lab.
Okay.
And the first film that comes out of there is Dinosaur, and that one's innovative because the backgrounds are real live action backgrounds, and they put the dinosaurs in there. Some people didn't like it because the dinosaurs talked. Eisner didn't like that he couldn't copyright what a dinosaur looked like because he couldn't copyright the characters to realistic dinosaurs. People don't remember this film, but when it came out, some of the reviewers claimed that it was better than The Lion King.
Wow.
But
what year did that come out? Do you know?
I think 2000.
Okay.
But the reason I mentioned the Secret Lab is because their second film was being shepherded by Thomas Schumacher, the flamboyantly gay guy, and it was called The Wild, or it was called Wildlife. I always mix those two up because they did make one called The Wild. It was called Wildlife, and it was set in the 1970s. And it was about the culture around like Studio 59 or whatever it is. They had like the raves and everything in New York with the drugs. I think there's a picture of it in the woke folder actually.
Okay.
Or that it's one of the subfolders. I had a title. I had a picture of the two of the characters, but this film was like very edgy. It pushed Rainbow Jihad stuff, and Roy Disney personally shut this down. And they don't talk about why he shut it down in any of the histories. They just say it was mature. The reason they shut it down was because it had a lot of the cast were flamboyantly gay characters. And one of the joke where they did a screening of the story reel. And the line that Roy shut the film down on, they had a character crawling out of a sewer, a gay character. And he says, "Whoa, that's the first time I've ever crawled out of a manhole before." It's supposed to have two meanings. And Roy stood up. No. Roy stood up and he said, "We do not make films like this at Disney." And that shut it down. They probably put like 20 million, 30 million in this because they had to build this secret lab up. They were doing innovative things with the animation and everything.
And this was Wildlife, correct?
Yeah, Wildlife, yes. There's a picture of the characters too. It's like a drawing. It should be right next to that.
Okay.
In the folder. They were recording actors. They had Deborah Messing was in it, and she was in Will and Grace. And they had.
I think I found your characters here.
Yeah, well, you can see what I mean by what they look like.
Yeah, definitely don't look Disney-ish.
It was very edgy. But Roy personally shut that film down, and we're going to link. I've got two articles, a two-part article by Floyd Norman who worked on it. And this would have been Wildlife.
In what year do you know?
Well, probably would have come out in 2003 or 2, somewhere in there.
Goodness.
But I have a book that has a lot of the artwork in it. So That's the only sampling I could find online that was worth it. I have an animation test we're going to link to as well, what it would have looked like. It's that female character walking. But that just tells you what, Roy wasn't into any of the stuff that they're doing now. And this is why I believe the reason everything got the way it is because Roy died. There was no one there to keep an eye on what they were doing in animation that cared. And that's how everything got out of control. What else is going on at this time? They start doing TV musicals. They do Geppetto with Drew Carey. They do a version of Oliver, Music Man, Annie. They want to do a Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is all Eisner's thing, but I don't think they're very successful because they only do it for a couple of years and they stop. Then Atlantis comes out the next year, and that film ends right at 90 minutes. And for the type of film it is, it should have been at least 2 hours long because there's all this stuff going on, all these characters. I thought it was a noble experiment kind of thing, but it didn't have time to be what it needed to be because they wanted to make it like a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of thing, adventure kind of film. And it just ends at 90 minutes because that's what animated films ended at that time. Now they end at 2 hours, some of them. But back then they had to end exactly at 90 minutes because of the economics of it, where they had a new turnaround of every 90 minutes to have another audience. That's why animated films are only 90 minutes long, or they were. They're not now, but that's where that came from. And they start reanimating some of the films from the 90s, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Lion King, because they're going to release them as IMAX releases. So the versions you get now on DVD and everything, Blu-ray, those aren't the original versions that came out in the 90s. They've been touched up to look good on IMAX screens. And some things have been changed completely in those films.
Why do they do that, man? Why?
Well, that's why I have a Laserdisc player, and I bought them all on Laserdisc on eBay a few years ago.
Of course you do.
Now, here's another one you guys are going to find interesting. You remember the movie Ice Age?
Oh, yeah. I liked it.
Well, Fox thought it was going to be a loser, so they tried to sell it to Disney. And the Disney execs saw that movie and they laughed at it. They said the character designs were ugly and the story was stupid, all this stuff. And so when that film comes out, that becomes a big hit. And I think that was the biggest non-Disney animated film up to that time. It did more than Anastasia. Wow. And after that, they tried to get the director to work for Pixar, but he stays there with Ice Ponds or Blue Sky Studio. And,
Blue Sky Studio, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Disney ended up shutting them down because they bought Fox a few years ago, and they shut down Blue Sky.
Wait, say that again?
Disney bought Fox a couple of years ago when they went to Disney Plus because they wanted the films for their library, the live action films and the TV. So they bought Blue Sky and they shut it. They bought Fox. Blue Sky was Fox owned Blue Sky, and Disney shut down Blue Sky. So that studio no longer exists, but Disney owns all their films.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember this.
Mm-hmm. I think they did some Ice Age stuff for Disney Plus, but I don't have Disney Plus, so. And this was also the time that they make Pirates of the Caribbean politically correct. I don't have any pictures of that, but that's when they started changing the ride. They changed some lines. They didn't want to have the pirates chasing women anymore. And they're pirates. They're not supposed to be saints. They're bad guys. They even say in the song that they're rotten eggs.
Right.
And one of the guys that worked on the change, he claimed that the audio on the original version was damaged, but I have the original audio, so that's not true. One of the lines they changed was there's a pirate that he's commenting to the people going by, and he talks about how he's looking for this woman that's hiding in a barrel from him, and she pops out of the barrel and everything.
Right.
And he talks about how he's going to hoist his colors on her. So that sounds like a sexual thing. That was there from the beginning. Well, they changed it where now he's looking for a cat that stole a sandwich. And they also they go back in later and they just keep changing it because of these Pirates of the Caribbean films. They put the characters in there, but they took out the bridal auction, and they have the redhead. She's selling guns, and I think that's kind of worse in a way. She's a pirate wench selling guns, and then when the pirates are chasing the women, it was funny because they had some of the women were chasing the pirates, and the pirates are running away because they don't want to be caught by the woman. And it's just like no one has any sense of humor at all.
That's where we're at. There is no sense of humor.
But that was almost 20 years ago that this started with Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was really the first thing at Disney where they started changing things from the past to make them politically correct. Was that ride? So I was thinking back on that, and I really think that was and it was around the time Atlantis came out. And
what was Atlantis? I don't remember that.
That one I just talked about. That was like a science fiction kind of a deal, like a Jules Verne thing. And they go into the center of the earth to find Atlantis. And there's people down there. Leonard Nimoy was in it. I'm trying to think what stars were in it. One of the characters was played by the guy that played the Johnny Cochran character on Seinfeld.
Okay, yeah.
I can't remember his name, but I remember the character. Yeah, that was Atlantis.
I don't remember that at all, man.
It's worth seeing once. That if you can. The DVD set for that is one of the best DVD sets ever made, of all the bonus material, of all the thought they put into this film of the backstories, but they didn't put the backstories in the film, and some of that really needed to be there to care about the characters. But it's an adventure film. It's not a traditional Disney film. There's no songs or anything. When they made it, they had shirts made that said, no songs, more explosions.
So if you have Disney Plus, do you get just the movie, or do you get all these little background things?
I'm not sure. Do they? I'm not sure if they have bonus content on there. That's why I hold on to my DVDs and Blu-rays.
Okay.
And some of that stuff I know they've been erasing because John Lasseter has been disappearing from some of the Pixar bonus features that are on the digital. If like his director commentaries are gone now on the digital versions. Because some of the Blu-rays and DVDs came with digital copies for free. And I go through there, and sometimes some of the bonus features are gone. And it's not just Pixar, it's all the different companies.
And why are they cutting John Lasseter out?
Because they forced him out, and they claimed he's a sexual predator.
So, okay. So,
and I'll get to that a little later, but...
interesting. Okay. I was about to say, you're just cutting people out, but then you threw that in there. But we got some stories to tell about that, huh?
But Jeffrey Katzenberg was erased from Disney history as well when he left Disney. They wouldn't put him in the documentaries. They weren't allowed to talk about him when Eisner was there. After Eisner left, they were allowed to talk about him. Sometimes he came in and he got interviewed. He's part of the history. He should be there. I mean, that's you don't erase. Even when Walt was alive, there was a guy that designed Disneyland, and they had a falling out. He was erased from history, and there was a book about him recently that they put out. And he built theme parks after Disney, after he built Disneyland. And they had to, because they had that falling out, they erased him from history, and you shouldn't erase anybody from history.
No kidding, man. Oh.
There's only a couple more Disney films that come out before they shut the studio down. They had Lilo and Stitch, and that was made in Florida. Now they changed the ending on that because the original ending, they steal a 747 and they fly it through Honolulu with the buildings, and that came out right before 9/11. So they had to change the whole ending where they do it with a spaceship. And they don't go around buildings. They go around a volcano. And this was all fully animated, and you can find it. It was on one of the DVD releases. And that was made to be like a cheat film like Dumbo, and it was a big success. And
wow. Yeah. Do you have that for our notes at the bottom here?
I will put it on there. I just thought of that while I was talking.
Yeah, look at you, man. I swear. It's awesome. I would like to see that original ending for sure.
I spend all week making notes, and I still think of things while I'm talking about it.
I'm telling you, man, Professor Ed, everybody.
The other film that comes out is Treasure Planet, and this leads to Roy getting fired from Disney.
Wait a minute. You can fire Roy Jr. from Disney?
Yeah, because they had a law that in the bylaws that once you reach 72, you could be fired from being an executive. So they used that against Roy.
Wait a minute.
That's because Treasure Planet bombed. Treasure Planet was the dream project of the directors. They're just collectively known as Ron and John. I always mix their last names up. I think it's John Musker and Ron Clements. They did Aladdin, Little Mermaid. They did Hercules. They did Great Mouse Detective. They wanted to do Treasure Planet all the way back before all this, back in the early 80s. And Jeffrey Katzenberg wouldn't let them do it. And they finally had to get it in their contract. They would get to do Treasure Planet if they did Hercules. So they do Treasure Planet, and it bombs. But it was a very expensive film to make. And so Eisner blames Roy for it.
Yeah. Was there any kind of public backlash? Was there
No.
anything that Roy Disney Jr. said
Well,
after
he does.
this?
He does. There is the Save Disney movement happens after that, and it leads to Eisner getting fired himself, and then Roy comes
wow.
back.
Oh my goodness.
After Treasure Planet, Ron and John leave Disney, and Roy gets fired. And Roy puts out a statement that the company has become soulless, rapacious. He complains about how they're just micromanaging everything, and they're buying up assets like ABC and ESPN and all that. And what he ends up doing is he starts the Save Disney movement, and there's a couple of animators that left after Atlantis. One of them was David Pruxma, and he's like the head of the Save Disney thing. He gets with Roy, and this is in some of the history books for Disney where they start getting people to push back on Eisner about how everything is going downhill, but it's nothing like it is now. It's worse now.
Mm-hmm.
And Eisner's kind of out of control right at this point. Like Finding Nemo comes along, and Eisner thinks it's going to bomb, and he's just going to buy Pixar. And it ends up becoming the most successful animated film ever made up to that point.
I mean, how do people in any walk of life, how do they make it to the level of CEO of some of these major corporations with complete misunderstanding of what the public is going to like or anticipate what the public's going to like?
I think it's because they live in a bubble.
Seriously,
you're good when you first get there, but when you're in the bubble with all the yes men, you lose touch of what the audience wants. Walt never did. He never lost that. Walt never did. But the executives since then, and now they just want to lecture to the audience all the time.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's a fact.
So Nemo comes out, and then the last two animated features that are the hand-drawn ones. Brother Bear, and that is the most boring animated film I've ever seen. It took me like 5 sittings to get through the whole thing, and I haven't seen it since. It was made.
And it's only 90 minutes, huh?
Yeah, it is. And then I guess that one's beloved by the Rainbow Geode thing because the furry community loves it because the guy in it remains a bear at the end of the movie. He becomes a bear.
Okay.
So, I guess. And I got told that recently. The last movie they do is Home on the Range, and that one started out as a movie called Sweating Bullets. The original version was about a gang of ghost cattle rustlers, and they chase the cows off of cliffs by scaring them, and then they rustle the cattle ghosts up to the afterlife. And there was this horse named Bullets, and he had to face his fears on that, and that story didn't work, and that ended up getting retold, and it became this Home on the Range film.
Oh, hold on a second. Hold on. Well, there we go. I gotta share this picture.
And I have some of the artwork from that as well in one of the books I have. They show some of the artwork from the original version. And what backs this up is some of the characters in this are called the Willies, and they were called the Willies when they were ghosts. They're not ghosts in this version. Now, what's funny about this one is they cast Roseanne as one of the cows. So you make your own joke there. That film was rated PG because she makes the comment where she comes walking off and you see the cow udder. She says, "Yes, they're real," and stop looking. And that got the film a PG rating. Now that's been spun in recent years where they claim that they got rated PG because the cows have udders, but it was because of that line. I lived through it. I remember the articles.
Interesting. By the way, I see where Danny, who was it? Somebody said, oh gosh, now I've lost the comment. Oh, Wombat Mommy, Treasure Planet is so underrated. What are your thoughts? Yeah. Was it? You think it was actually good?
I think it's underrated. I thought it was a decent film. I went back to it a few years ago, and it was better than I remembered it. And it's not a bomb. I mean, it just didn't find its audience. The art style on that. They combine futuristic stuff with 1700s, the artwork. Mm-hmm. So it's like I guess you'd call it steampunk now, but that didn't exist then. But I really like that. It's a nice story. I don't think it's as good of like the original one that Walt did with Robert Newton as Long John Silver. I like his Long John Silver better. Okay. You buy the relationship more, but it's not a bad movie.
Okay. And that's Treasure Planet.
Yeah, it's probably on Disney Plus.
And Atlantis is only good if you've seen the bonus material.
It makes it better. Well, they have a book in this that they use as a map to get to Atlantis, and what they did in the stuff that's not in the movie, they had this whole history where this book had traveled all through ancient history and modern history, and like Hitler had it, and this guy had it, and and they should have did a sequence in this film where you followed this book through history. So because the book just shows up, you don't. It should have been treated like how in the Indiana Jones films, like the Ark of the Covenant was. You almost thought it was like a character because they talked about it all the time even when you didn't see it. And they could have done that with this.
Okay.
So they shut down the studio after Home on the Range, and there was an animated film that was almost done that they just wrote off. It was called A Few Good Ghosts. We'll have some links to some things from this. I've got the opening sequence. We'll talk more about it in a future show. It starred Dolly Parton, and she wrote like a dozen songs for this thing.
Oh, wow.
And one of the characters was a Lincoln character, and it's about the Ozarks, and it's like a Romeo and Juliet story with hillbillies. And then there's these little, they're like dolls that come to life. And like Dolly Parton was one of the dolls. There was one that looked like Abraham Lincoln. And one of the things they cast the guy that was in Sandberg's Lincoln to play Lincoln. And there's one scene where he frees the chickens. Because he's freeing the slaves, he's freeing the chickens. But
okay.
But they shut the film down. A lot of the animation people, they all say that worked on it. A lot of them say that it would have been a decent film if they'd finished it.
Do you think that might get released again at some point, or get released? Or
probably not now. It was 20 years ago, but I would love to see it finished.
So is there any videos out about this? It sounds interesting.
I don't know if there's a documentary about it, but some of the video. See, the animators that work on this stuff, they have the tests where they were in their animation and everything where they're working on it. Yeah. And they post them on YouTube and on their blogs and things. And that's where some of
they don't get in trouble for that.
Oh, some of the stuff is still there.
That's wild. Okay.
And well, when they shut down the animation studios, a lot of the people that worked at Disney, they go on to do that Curious George movie that came out about 20 years ago that Ron Howard made. It had Will Ferrell in it and Dick Van Dyke, and it wasn't a bad movie. I saw it with my nephews.
Okay.
And they also worked on the Simpsons movie. And Eisner starts making theme park films. He does the Pirates of the Caribbean, and he wanted to fire Johnny Depp from that movie because he said he was ruining the movie when he saw the dailies. And that's why everybody went to see that movie. They do a Country Bears movie, and I guess that's really bad. I didn't see it because they changed it. They made him a rock band. They did a Haunted Mansion movie, and that bombs. That was with Eddie Murphy, and they just did another Haunted Mansion movie, and that bombed. And The Incredibles comes out. That's directed by Brad Bird, who was one of those guys that started at Disney back in the early 80s, and they got rid of him. And he went on to do The Simpsons, and he did Iron Giant. They brought him back. He was friends with John Lasseter because they went to college together. They did The Incredibles. And this is about when Roy gets rid of Eisner. And Bob Iger gets made CEO because he was like one of Eisner's underlings that came in with the ABC deal. And so what Iger does is he gets the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And that was the first character Well, it wasn't the first character. The first one was Alice in Wonderland. He did a short series with a live action girl.
And this was the trade that involved Al Michaels, the sports
announcer. Yeah. And that's why Iger likes that story. But he probably could have got it for nothing because who cares about a 100-year-old character? Because he only got the cartoons that Walt worked on. It was only the first year of that character. After that, he was worked on by Walter Lantz, who did Woody Woodpecker. And around the same time, Roy keeps trying to get Song of the South released on DVD. And one of the things they do is they make a short about John Henry, with the hammer. And what they want to do is they're going to have James Earl Jones do a narration at the beginning of it, and they're going to have bonus features and all this stuff. Well, they go and ask Maya Angelou, and she threatens to bring Disney to their knees with boycotts if they release that film. So Bob Iger has refused to release Song of the South ever since, and Roy kept trying to get it released. And then there was Enchanted. That came out around this time, and because they shut down the animation studio, all that animation was done by former Disney animators at their studios they'd opened after they left Disney. If you look at Enchanted, that film's like a love letter to with all the hand-drawn Disney films. There's like little Easter eggs through the whole thing.
Oh wow!
And
I was just looking this up. Roy Disney died in 2009.
yeah,
Was he
2009.
still? Was
He
he
was
back?
still involved in.
He was still okay.
He
when
got
died.
back to Disney, but he was mostly releasing the vintage content to DVD. That's what he was focusing on.
Wow. Okay.
And he was doing the last thing he did was the True Life Adventures that he put them on DVD. But when he worked for his uncle, Walt, he filmed that stuff originally. So that's why he wanted to get the True Life Adventures out before he died. Song of the South was going to be next, and he passed away, so it didn't happen. But even with Enchanted, that was going to be edgier. They were going to have when she ends up in the human world, the real world, they were going to think she was a stripper, and that was the original version.
Why did they even consider this stuff, man?
Well, you know what else is interesting with Easter eggs? I don't know what the origin of this is, but if you look in the little epilogue at the end where they have the villain sidekick, he's doing books and he's selling books in a bookstore. The bookstore is called Epstein's Books. I don't know who that Epstein is, but so one of the things Eisner had done was he set up a studio to do Pixar sequels. So Iger, what he ends up doing is making a deal to buy Pixar. He puts John Lasseter in charge of animation at both studios. And Steve Jobs is on the board of directors, and he's like Lasseter's protector. Ed Catmull's also brought in is part of this. He was the guy that was in charge of Pixar. And it's Bob Iger who really ushers in the wokeness stuff in the films. It doesn't really start right away, but it comes in around this. This is how this starts. Lasseter, he shuts down all the cheapquels, the direct-to-video sequels. He shuts them all down, except for they're doing a series of Tinkerbell films. And there was a version of Tinkerbell that got shut down because it was a lesbian version, and John Lasseter shut that down. And it was 70% animated in India. I mean, it was animated in India, but 70% of the film was done. So Lasseter has to fix
a
all
lesbian Tinkerbell. Oh boy.
It was the sisterhood, militant feminism, and all that. Lasseter has to fix all these films that started under Eisner. The first CGI film Eisner does with Disney, he did Chicken Little, and he couldn't decide if Chicken Little should be a boy or a girl, and they kept changing it back and forth after it was already animated.
Oh my gosh.
That film didn't do very well. There was originally a version of that. I don't have this in my notes, but I just thought of it. It was going to be in a summer camp with the Predators, and they were going to like Chicken Little thought that the camp counselors were going to eat all the kids. And everyone that worked on Chicken Little said that version was better than the version they released. The version they released was about aliens and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I vaguely remember that now.
And then the movie Bolt comes out after that. That was CGI, and everyone forgets that one. And I haven't seen it since it came out. And I don't remember one way or the other. But then Meet the Robinsons, that's the one that Lasseter has to fix. And he's changed some things in the movie. And we're going to have two links in our links. It's a short they were going to do with the villain. But that one could have been better than it was. It has a good idea, good concept, but it doesn't quite make it in the execution.
Mm-hmm.
And then over at Pixar, Cars comes out. And Joe Ranft had passed away at that point. And that's when things start going bad for Pixar, was Joe Ranft was no longer there. And Ratatouille, that was originally going to be the first film that Pixar did on their own after they broke away from Disney, but because they stayed with Disney, it was still a Disney release. But that film was supposed to be an allegory about Pixar leaving Disney. That's why the main character is a rat. And,
did Disney realize this at the time?
Well, they couldn't do anything about it. Because the restaurant, listen, this is some of the restaurant has all these people carrying on the legacy of the chef that passed away. And the rat can only hear and see the chef because he's a ghost. And that's supposed to be the ghost of Walt. And the critics won't swallow the creations at that restaurant anymore. And that's like what they were doing with Disney. And Disney wanted to the restaurant was going to put out frozen food with that chef's face on it. So that's like Disney using Walt's name, putting out all these direct-to-video sequels, all these terrible films. And at the end of the movie, he realizes he doesn't need the ghost anymore, so he's going to be his own chef, and that would have been Pixar with its own little studio, and that they did that on purpose.
Wow.
So that's another story you've probably never heard, but
No.
and I really like that film. I thought that turned out great, and Brad Bird directed that one.
And that's wow. That's wild, man. I love it.
Then Up comes out, and then that one was a big success as well. You know, the flying house and little old man and everything.
Oh yeah.
Then they decide they want to have a black princess to the princess line for the marketing. And that's how they come around with the Princess and the Frog.
Princess and the Frog.
It's the most politically correct movie made up to that point. Everyone that worked on it had said, a lot of people that worked on it said it was micromanaged. Every time stories would come out about it, the woke people would go nuts. Like the princess's name was going to be Maddie. And the woke people went mad, but that sounds like Mammy. So they changed her name to Tiana. And all these consultants they worked with, they tried to make it so they would say that it wasn't racist. Well, now they're all coming back all these years later, and they're saying the film's racist because she's a frog through most of the movie. Even the title was originally going to be the Frog Princess. They couldn't call it that because they said it was racist to compare a black person to a frog. And this is why I don't like that film. You can feel all this political correctness.
Right, the tension, right? Yeah.
I wanted to when they had this film come out, they tied it in with all the original hand-drawn films from the 90s, and I wanted to like it, but I didn't like it. What I think they should have done if they wanted to have a black princess, they should have took a story from African culture, like all the other princesses come from a story from their cultures, and because there's a lot of stories in all African culture they could have used, and instead they take a European story and they plop it in New Orleans after Katrina happened, and it's just all this political correct stuff. And they were going to supposedly bring back hand-drawn animation, and this was the film that they were going to do it with. And what they end up doing, the executives decide they don't want to have the animation anymore, hand-drawn animation. So they put all the animators on a Winnie the Pooh sequel, and they put it out against the last Harry Potter movie. It bombed, so they shut the studio down. That was orchestrated, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Roy passes away at this time. That ends the DVD releases of everything, the vintage stuff. And things go on. They do Rapunzel, but they change. The executives decide Princess and the Frog failed because of racism and because the title was a girl title. So they, instead of calling it Rapunzel, they call the film Tangled. And that's why all the films now, that's true too. All the films now have titles like they have Brave, and they're all words that describe what the film's about instead of a title. And that all started with Tangled. And Brave comes out after this, and that one was created by the director that worked on it, and they start second guessing her, and she claims that it's because of sexism, and then she gets hooked up with Kathleen Kennedy at before Lucasfilm. So I think that was more that they it wasn't to do with sexism. I think it was more that it was the established order, and she was brought in new to do a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that title of Brave was originally going to be called The Bear and the Bow. And they just went through all the movies and they changed all the titles. And around this time, we have a photo of this. Jeffrey Katzenberg, he is the man who discovered Barack Obama. So you have a cartoon guy is who you have to thank for everything that's happened since then to the country.
Let's see. Katzenberg and Obama. I'll find it. I've seen it.
Katzenberg was very short, and you will see in this photo, he's like a Anthony Fauci size guy. And he discovered Obama, and he brought him to Hollywood, and he introduced him to everybody, and that's how they all got behind him. And remember, Katzenberg started DreamWorks with Spielberg, so they're friends. Spielberg's now in charge of Obama's cinematic legacy. And,
that's interesting. Yeah, I remember that picture from last week, but I can't find it today for some reason.
Obama said that if it wasn't for Katzenberg, he never would have been elected president. So, and after he got elected the first time, Obama goes to DreamWorks and he praises the company for all the jobs they've created in the economy and everything. 2 weeks later, DreamWorks lays off 50% of their workforce, and all the jobs went overseas. And the reason Katzenberg got in with Obama is he wanted to open a studio in China, and a lot of the DreamWorks films are animated in China now.
Wow,
and
this is
and it's really during these Obama years is when the wokeness really starts taking hold everywhere. And this is when I first started noticing all these millennial Disney fans where they treat Disney like it's a religion. And I mean, like we're talking, there's people that make these films and there's history behind it and everything. And they're just seeing it as this religion almost. And now we have people that are called Disney adults where they go to the theme parks and act like kids and they dress up in the costumes and everything. And that never happened before. And
that's true. Yeah.
You also have Meryl Streep gave a speech where she called Walt Disney an anti-Semite and a gender bigot.
Wait. Meryl Streep said.
Yeah, because she wanted to be in Saving Mr. Banks, and they cast Emma Thompson instead. And she started attacking Walt. And the woke fans wanted that statue that's in our preview thumbnail removed from Disney because they think he's a terrible guy. And there were starting to be talks of removing Walt's name from the company because all these people are starting to believe all these stories. Abigail Disney comes out. That would have been Walt's grandniece, and she says all this stuff is true about Walt, but it's not.
Oh.
And
hold on, I finally found it. There you go. It only took me 10 minutes.
That's okay. That's Obama with Jeffrey Katzenberg. Katzenberg's probably standing on a milk crate there.
Okay. All right.
I remember Glenn talked about meeting Jeffrey Katzenberg once. So.
Oh, how did that go?
He had him for lunch, and he said his people that work for him are very shrewd because he knew what the names of Glenn's wife and all of his kids were. And I think that was the one where he talked to Glenn about our country is in serious trouble or something like that. I think that was Katzenberg that he had that meeting with. I remember hearing about it on the show.
Wow.
But another thing that happens around this time, the first person they try to get canceled was Jodie Benson, who was the voice of Ariel in Little Mermaid. And that's because there was a reception kind of a thing for a film. And this girl comes out of the audience and she says she came out to her parents as gay because of the Little Mermaid movie.
What?
So Jodie Benson tells this girl, repent and find Jesus. She's a very devout Catholic. So they try to get Jodie Benson fired over this. They try to say she's anti-gay. Now, she was friends with Howard Ashman before he came to Disney. He's the one that brought her in to be Ariel. They worked on a musical called Smile. And in her autobiography, which I don't have handy here, but everyone should read it, she talks about the last time she saw Howard Ashman, and he was dying of AIDS in the hospital. And she broke down in the hall crying because she knew he was going to die, and she was there to see her friend again. And she didn't want him to hear her crying in the hallway, but he did. And she prayed that he found Jesus before he died. And I mean, she really loved him, really cared about him, and they're trying to say she's anti-gay.
Mm-hmm.
And what also happens at this time is we have pictures of this through the show Once Upon a Time. That starts on ABC, and they end up they're allowed to use the Disney characters. Did you ever see this, Keith?
I feel like that's something my daughters watch or are familiar with.
You probably wouldn't want them to.
Oh, okay, good. That's good to know.
It was done by the writers from Lost, and
it just sounds familiar.
Through the course of this series, what they do is they make adultery okay.
Okay, good.
They make rape okay at least 3 times. They have genocide okay because they're villains. They're non-repentant villains, and they commit genocide, killing people and stuff. There's no comeuppance for them. And then they start putting gay storylines into the stories. Now, online, all these woke Disney fans, they're like obsessing every character in the show has to be gay. Even the little boy that's like, he starts out like 8 years old, he's got to be gay. And I've quit participating in online stuff at this point because the Disney fans, this is what they've become. And the kid's got an adoptive mom that's the evil queen from Snow White, and then the biological mom is Snow White's daughter. And the people are like, well, he's got 2 moms, and why don't the moms get together? And it's just ridiculous. But this all starts this, then they start doing the live action remakes on top of this. And the first one was an Alice in Wonderland one. And then they do Maleficent. And that one was they make the villain the hero, the parents of the villains. At the end of the movie, the prince is there kind of off to the sidelines, and he's there stuck to observe this militant feminist utopia that he's got to see now. And they completely demasculized the prince.
And which was that one again?
Maleficent. That was the witch from Sleeping Beauty. I think I put a still of Maleficent. I don't remember.
Okay.
But the one I'm going to spend a couple minutes on is they did Oz the Great and Powerful, and that's the only one of these that I've seen that I've liked, and it's a conservative movie. And this Once Upon a Time, it went for like 7 or 8 years, something like that.
Yeah,
and that's really what I think. I wrote it down on what all this woke stuff, because it came. The people that were kids watching this, now they're the adults that are starting to get into making the movies right now. And the one that I liked was Oz the Great and Powerful, and that was supposed to be a prequel to the MGM Wizard of Oz, but Disney doesn't own the MGM Wizard of Oz. And the conservative angle is that it's a circus con man is the wizard, and he gets caught in a tornado. None of this is in the Oz books, by the way. This was an original story. He gets caught in a tornado, and he begs with God to spare his life, and he will be a great man. And so the film answers his prayer. He ends up in the land of Oz, and in the land of Oz, they're waiting for this prophesized wizard to come and save them from all these witches. And what the wizard does is he uses American ingenuity to get them all to be inspired to save themselves from these witches. And I find it to be a very conservative themed kind of movie, just like A Bug's Life.
And what was it again?
Oz the Great and Powerful. It's probably on Disney Plus. They were going to do a sequel, but they can't because they canceled James Franco because of Me Too stuff.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And the only thing I think they got wrong with that is they made one of the witches one of his spurned lovers, and they should have had her conning him as well. And that would have been a better story point. And then they have the live action Beauty and the Beast come out, where they make a big deal about they made LeFou gay, the villain's sidekick. And the director brings it up before the film comes out. All the actors pile on and everything. So they all bring it up. So then when there's a backlash, they blame Christians for seeing the film and reading it into it. And I confronted the producer on that, and I gave him the paper trail of all the links showing that they came up with this. The movie wasn't even out yet. And I said, people in the middle of the country do not hate gay people. They're just tired of this being rammed down our throats all the time. And he gave me a very measured response. He never considered that. He thanked me for the response. Then he unfriended me on Facebook. And he was one of my heroes from doing animated films. When I was growing up, he produced all the original. Yeah. And then the Little Mermaid that just came out, they made Ariel black and everything. And they call it the woke Little Mermaid. They took some of the songs out because they say it's rape culture for Kiss the Girl and everything. And I think that through Alan Menken that they were accusing you of rape culture with that song, and because they've even pulled that song from the theme parks and everything out, just like Zippity Doodah. And there was also with this woke string of films, they did Mary Poppins Returns. Now some people really like that one, but I think it's too similar to the original film. Because like the original film, they clean the room, and in this one they take a bath. They go on a painting in the original film. This one they go on a China bowl. They visit Uncle Albert in the original film. This one they visit her cousin. They have the chimney sweeps in the original film. This one they have lamplighters. At the end of the film, the original one was Let's Go Fly a Kite. This one they have balloons. And when the film came out, the actors were talking about how they want to do a third Mary Poppins film where she helps a transgender child realize what their gender actually is. And this was the actors talking about this and the directors and everything. And the latest in these remakes is the Snow White remake. So I know we wanted to get to that. Rachel Ziegler was Snow White. I have both before and after because now they've digitally done the dwarves now. She claims that the original film is sexist and the prince is a stalker.
Okay.
And she talks about all the old films in the 30s are all old-fashioned and sexist. But if you look in the 1930s, a lot of those films were about socialite women who didn't need a man. And so she's never seen all these films from back then. Now, if we're going to go into what Snow White's really all about with the gender stuff, the Snow White, the Disney version, it's about a young girl on the verge of becoming a young woman, and she's a threat to the queen's femininity. And the queen's a controlling militant feminist, and all the characters surrounding the queen are like this. You have the magic mirror is the only male character in her life, and he's her slave, and he's forced to do whatever she wants. And she looks in the mirror all the time and sees his reflection looking back at her, and it's a ghostly face looking back at her. And the huntsman's their servant, and the queen orders him to murder Snow White. And rather than following her orders, he spares her life at the last minute. He warns her about the queen. And you remember when the queen, tells him to go kill Snow White, she says, the penalty if you fail. So even though he knows she's going to kill him, he still betrays the queen.
So we've gone from this, right?
Yep. That's the original.
That's the original. Simpler times, right there. That's for sure. And now, modern day, we've got. Oh my goodness gracious! I haven't seen this.
They claim they were magical creatures when and then this was because that one dwarf actor said that it was anti-dwarfs to have dwarfs in the movie. Then you have dwarf actors that would love to be in this movie.
Right. I mean, this is your chance, right?
Yeah. But instead of hiring dwarf actors, they take jobs away from real dwarfs and put in digital dwarves.
What is that? Oh yeah. So I've got that one. Hang on. That's interesting.
That just got released last week. So us missing that 1 week worked out because now we can see what the digital dwarves are.
This is something else right here. Ta-da.
Don't they look creepy? They look like the dwarves in Shrek, actually.
Yeah, that's not doing it for me. Come on.
And now the prince in the original version, he's the masculine ideal, and the queen's jealous of Snow White because he's giving Snow White attention and not her. And they had to cut this out of the Walt version because the prince was very hard to animate, but he had a lot more to do. He's based on Douglas Fairbanks. In the original version, he was going to get captured by the queen's men. She takes him down into the dungeon, and she makes a deal with him that if he chooses her, she'll let him free, and he sticks with Snow White. Then he ends up escaping. He goes looking for Snow White, and when he finally does find Snow White, everybody's now all the woke people, they make a comment. He's kissing a dead girl, and it's rape culture and all that. If you look at the film, he's kissing her goodbye because he thinks she's dead, and he's kissing her goodbye. And then you have the seven dwarfs, and they always get dismissed as being silly sidekicks, but they're also masculine figures. They're a community of hardworking little men, and the queen even calls them little men when she talks about them, the seven little men. And she's afraid of them because when she comes to take care of Snow White, she waits till they're not there, and she makes sure they're not there because she asks Snow White, "Are the seven little men here?" And you get the suggestion that there's some kind of a history there with the queen and the dwarves, because they all know that she's a witch and she's a threat. She might be in. They say Grumpy says she might be in that room and watching them, invisible and everything. And where the dwarves are when she's seducing Snow White with the apple, they're making a Snow White her own bed. And this was cut out of the movie, but it was animated. And they're doing masculine things. They have their own jobs. They go to work every day. They're making her a bed to preserve her modesty, where she will sleep downstairs in her own bed, so she won't be sleeping in their beds. And it was always traditional values where men would give up their comfort for a woman, and that's what the dwarves did in the film. Snow White also treats them maternally because she first thinks that when she goes into the cabin and sees the names, she thinks they're 7 orphan children, and she wants to take care of them and bake for them, protect them, that kind of a thing. And when the queen shows up, she shows up as a non-threatening, frail old woman. So that's non-threatening femininity. And she deceives Snow White with sympathy. And when the dwarves arrive, they waste no time chasing her down because she's a threat. They don't even go in the house to check on Snow White. They just see the queen. They go chasing her off the cliff. And when she climbs the mountain, she's going to smash them with a boulder. They're still coming after her. They're not afraid that she's going to kill them because they're doing the manly thing, taking out the threat to Snow White. And even the woman-hating Grumpy, he's the one that takes the lead. He's the one that takes charge, and Doc's supposed to be the leader. But if you go through and watch the film, you'll see all this in the film. And I'm not saying that they put that in there on purpose, but if we're going to read masculinity and femininity into this, that's how you do it. That's what it originally was.
By the way, you talked earlier about more, quote, conservative type
Stories?
Disney offerings like Bug's Life, and you mentioned Oz the Great. I only now found Oz the Powerful. Yeah, I only now found that picture here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because I've not seen that. That's interesting.
Well,
and that was a movie?
That was a movie. I think it came out about 10 years ago.
Wow.
That's the only one of those I've seen. I've not seen all of them because I think they're just remaking all these films because they're trying to remake the animated films and get them right. Because they did Dumbo, they took the crows out, and they have him. He doesn't stay in a circus. He gets released into an animal shelter or something. I don't know.
But I've also found some other pictures. I'm behind on these, obviously.
That's okay.
So there's this. This is obviously the Mary Poppins you talked about earlier. But what was the other one here that you referenced? Was there a?
I had the Woke Little Mermaid I had in there.
Oh yeah, there's a Woke Little Mermaid. So we got to get all these because you took the time to go find these pictures, Ed. So let's get these up here. There's the Woke Little Mermaid. Everybody saw that when it was.
That came out last summer.
Right, and then
I know people that worked on the original Little Mermaid that went to see that and they weren't impressed. If you notice, a lot of these live action remakes, they take all the color out of the films. That's Maleficent.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is that Angelina Jolie playing that?
Yeah, she played. Oh. Yeah, they did 2 of them. I didn't see the sequel. I saw the first one. I didn't like the first one.
Okay.
They did a Cinderella one too, and I just thought that was boring.
What was this? When did this Alice in Wonderland come out? I vaguely remember seeing this.
I think about 2009. Okay. I think it was after Roy died. And people went to see it because Johnny Depp was in it. And then they did a sequel.
Right. Okay.
I didn't care for that one either. It was Tim Burton that did that. They brought him back to Disney, and he's doing some of these.
All right. So where are we going to land with today's show?
Well, I've got one more page, and I've gone through all of my notes for today. I got a little behind.
Okay, fire away.
I told you the story. Okay. We'll bring up the Hall of Presidents.
Hall of Presidents. Oh, boy. Here we go.
Now, when they did the Hall of Presidents, that Walt wanted it to be an attraction called One Nation Under God with all the presidents there. And that's what was going to be the Hall of Presidents.
Yeah, everybody loves the Hall of Presidents because you got air conditioning in there. You know what I'm saying?
Well, when they built it originally in the 70s at Disney World, the theme of the Hall of Presidents was about leadership.
Okay. And by the way, I've lost my Hall of Presidents folder. So
well, it was there. I saw it.
Yeah, where was that? Do you remember what sub?
I think it's just in the woke folder, maybe.
Okay, I'll get back there. Just bear with me. You keep talking. I'll catch up.
The Hall of Presidents, they revamped it in the 90s, so it focused on social justice rather than leadership. And they brought in Cornel West.
Oh no!
And he rewrote the script. That they had. Tim Rice wrote a fictionalized script for Bill Clinton to give a speech in this. Okay. It wasn't based on a real speech. He did. Some of the Imagineers, they objected to them doing this because they said, now you've made the ride political by having a president speak that's in office. And Eisner's like, oh no, that's just making it up to date. And what the tradition was with the Hall of Presidents is they would always sculpt the face of both candidates when they would run for president.
Oh boy.
The first time they didn't do this was 2016 because they were so sure Hillary was going to win. So they didn't have a Trump face.
Oh my goodness. Hold on, because I see this here.
What they thought would be funny was put Hillary's face on the Trump body. and that is Trump. There's one photo I've got there where it's got Hillary's face.
What?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I've heard it from people who would know. That is the Hillary face on Trump's body. They did that on purpose. I don't know if they've ever changed it, but that was on purpose.
God, I can't with these people.
And that, what I really think happened with this woke stuff is when Trump got elected in 2016, that made everyone go nuts with all these filmmakers and stuff, because that was 2016, and you can pinpoint a lot of this woke stuff started up in 2016 where it really started taking root. And that's when they hired, I don't remember what his first name was, but there's a photo of him in there. His last name was Perlmutter. I think he's in the Marvel folder.
Okay.
They fired him from Marvel because he supported Trump, and he was the one that was in charge of all the films up to that point. This Perlmutter guy.
Yeah, I gotta find this. Yeah.
The woke people go back now and they claim he's racist because they said he was casting different actors that were black as the same character because he claimed that they all looked alike. And I find it very hard to believe someone would say that. That's a film guy. That's Perlmutter. And because he supported Trump, that's why they got rid of him at Marvel. And that's when they started bringing in all these woke executives, Rainbow Jihad executives.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And, you know, the films have just gone downhill ever since 2020. I think they were starting to introduce the woke stuff gradually. But now, ever since Endgame, it's all gone downhill except for Loki. Everyone kind of says that's probably the best thing they've done in their Wave 4. There's Perlmutter with Trump.
Mm-hmm. How dare he shake a president's hand?
Well, especially when I have Katzenberg with Obama, and he's the one that chose Obama. So what's the difference?
That's okay. But that's okay, because see, that's the left. That is,
well, now the critics are calling the MCU, the Marvel films, the MCU. Now they call it the MCU, and there's that.
That's good. That's smart.
There's that Doomcock guy that's on YouTube. He does you got to this guy. He has the best shtick. He just does. He filmed himself doing this stuff in a mask, like a Darth Vader mask. He just does all these gestures, and he says he's the future ruler of Earth, and he lives in a domain in the center of the Earth, and he's got a skull that he talks to, and one of the aliens from the H.P. Lovecraft stuff is in a tube, and he's wearing a Shriner hat, and he just dubs commentary about all the things going on. Well, he's been talking about Disney and Marvel and everything for years. So when they did the She-Hulk series, they put a parody of this Doomcock character in their She-Hulk film as the villain, the TV series. And he just loved that because now he's affecting the films.
That's cool.
You know, the latest thing is they've got the guy who was going to play Kang the Conqueror that he's now been fired because he got in trouble with the Me Too stuff. And then you've got Lucasfilm now. That's woke. They've got Kathleen Kennedy now running everything. And she originally worked with Spielberg on all of his films with her husband. I can't think of his name now. Marshall. I can't think of his first name. But all the way back to like E.T., they were involved. And when they were making all those films originally, E.T. and all that, Ron Miller wanted to have Spielberg come into Disney, and Disney wouldn't let them come in because they didn't want to deal with all of his entourage like Kathleen Kennedy and everything. They wanted everything to have the Disney feel. This was the old Disney. So they almost had E.T. as a Disney movie if they had let his entourage in. And you've seen what she's done with Star Wars, where she's made it all woke and everything. And now they've done it with Indiana Jones. And what we could have had for Indiana Jones for
here we go.
The Spielberg and George Lucas had done this whole script for what Indiana Jones 5 was going to be. And the story was going to be set during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay.
And it was going to be about how the Americans have the Ark of the Covenant. And the Russians had the Spear of Longinus. That was supposed to be the spear that pierced Christ's side. And in the folklore, the army that has either thing, they're both invincible. So this was going to be during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they all came to a head, where a nuclear war almost happened. And so the whole story was going to be about how they were going. Indiana Jones, there was that short round there. He was involved. Marion was going to be in this. and there was going to be a love interest for Short Round that was a Russian archaeologist, and they wanted to find both artifacts and get them lost to history so the world didn't get destroyed. And this would have been the peak of the whole Indiana Jones franchise. And they thought they would bring in the grandparents, bring in their kids, because he had the family there, because Short Round is pretty much the adopted son Indiana Jones had, you know, all the way back in Temple of Doom. That actor was in the latest season of Loki. Everyone loved it. They loved him in that it would have been a very similar character.
The Asian guy, right?
Yeah. And but you could have had this. This is them fighting zombies. But instead we got old Indiana Jones. That was a time travel story, and it was going to be to set up a Disney Plus series where this woke female character replaces him. I mean, they even had to do a new reshoot where they put Marion in the ending, because the original ending was going to be he sacrifices himself in the past, the young Indiana Jones, and he erased himself from history, and this woman lives out all the adventures we've seen in the films. So she replaces Indiana Jones. And,
that hurts, man.
Yeah. But that's what we could have had. I wish what they would have done back in the 90s, they could have done an Indiana Jones movie where the artifact was the Philosopher's Stone and the Nazis were in South America and they were going to bring back Hitler. And then you could have had a fist fight with Hitler versus Indiana Jones, because all the films would have lit up to it. That's my sequel.
That is a great
I came up with that on my own.
Write it down.
And everyone I tell that to, they're like, that should have been instead of the alien one. That's what they should have done.
And that's very heady of you to put it in South America too.
Well, that's where the Nazis all went to, is South America.
And that might be where Hitler himself ended up. But that's a whole new episode of At the Mic.
Well, how about I think what George Lucas screwed up on Revenge of the Sith, he kept saying that they were going to have Liam Neeson come back as Qui-Gon Jinn and explain how the Jedi Ghost thing works, and they didn't do it. Well, what they were going to do is just tack it on at the end of the movie. What they should have done was, when they're in the Jedi Temple looking at the video of Anakin killing all the kids, Qui-Gon's ghost should have showed up there, because that would have paralleled Return of the Jedi, where Obi-Wan Kenobi's ghost shows up. And Qui-Gon could have told him what the prophecy actually meant, what they need to do now, all this stuff. And I've told that to people ever since the movie came out, and they're like, why didn't they have that movie? Yeah, did you not write that down? You need to write that down and send it off to Disney. They would never do it. I know. Well, Ed, where are we? I just have to talk about John Lasseter. John Lasseter. Can we let's stop there? And I'm going to let you start with that next week. All right. Because I have to get my daughter somewhere here. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, no, that's good. So we'll pick it up there. So give us a preview of what next week is going to look like. Part 5. Part 5 is going to be just about Walt's patriotism, but we can start here and then go back into it. Okay. Okay. It's going to kind of parallel our faith episode we did. Very good, very good. Okay, so Walt's patriotism. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I hate to put the artificial stop there. I just well, that's okay. I need to get out over. Yeah. So listen, this has been fascinating. There's been so much knowledge encapsulated. Well, I wanted, because this is kind of a depressing story where it's the downfall of Disney. I wanted to give you some of the stories behind the films that nobody knows, and now you do. But you know what? What really hurts is the things that almost were. Yeah. That really hurts. We're going to do an episode on the Disney that never was, and that'll be whole films that they didn't make. Very good, very good. All right, well, Professor Ed McCray, Disney guru here, thanks for sharing your knowledge. We look forward to next week, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll do another live stream here, and in case you missed the announcement, we're going to be doing these live streams every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern through March 23rd. Going to be a 12-part series when we're done, kids, so buckle up. We're only a third of the way through. I can do it too. I know you can, Ed. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. We appreciate all of your comments in the live chat. Y'all are great. Thanks for making time, and y'all have a great weekend. Be well.